Yeah, go on then.
So we're talking about some new things that have come across our radar in terms of entrepreneurship, business startup, and going one's own way outside, the system as such. That system that's becoming more and more of a control system. And one of them is something called the Valhalla Network, and there's basically they're going through the process of setting up a bank in the UK, whereby you have to raise 30 million euros, which they're doing or have done, and it takes some years of accreditation, loads of paperwork. It needs all the people that can do that. And then it looks like they're setting themselves up then as essentially as an umbrella network to launch sort of franchise community banks, because their whole idea is about decentralizing the banking network, whereby the trouble today is that banks have become more and more centralized. Like, for example, the US has got something like 7,000 banks. Germany's got sort of, relative equal figure. China used to have one, because it had the communist model, centralized thing. Xi Jinping came in and he went and learned from Japan and Germany and other places that when you have decentralized local community banks, then they lend to people that are just starting businesses, and most of the actual real value creation in any community, group, nation, state, etc., is local businesses, because they're the people who actually set up a bike repair shop, open a bakery, etc., etc. So he decentralized. Now China has, similar to the US, 7,000 odd banks, and their economy has been doing really well. So anyway, so the point is this decentralization, whereby you're not reliant on a bureaucracy, and particularly bureaucracy that maybe has an ideology behind it that is out of touch with the community, what it needs, and the people in the community who are able to provide those things. And that's where real value creation is. And the point about banks, as we could speak about Elon Musk's new blockchain, what do you call it, Bitcoin type endeavor. But the point about banks is they can actually create money, in the sense that what money creation really means is essentially economics is just about accounting. So, we historically, we've used money just as a unit of account to say, okay, we did that transaction, I write it down, and then I materialize, in time it came, I materialized that writing as an actual coin note. So then it's like all your entries on an account have been materialized into actual units, and then those have been traded and so forth. So you're sort of swapping those rather than just writing every transaction down in your account. And so what banks do in this creation of money is, say somebody comes and says, I want to open a bakery, and they say, oh, there's no bakery in your town or your street. Yeah, we agree, you need a bakery, people are going to use it. So that person is creating something new in the world. The only way that can happen in the world, because our units of account are in money, is it has to be accounted for in money, financially. So the bank says, here's your loan, and that money comes into existence at that point. The important thing to remember is that it's not that the bank created money out of nothing. They just realized a real person's creation of value, and they just realized it into the accounting system we have, which at present is still focused on money.
Would you say that they're really just validating
exactly
that person, if you use that word to validate?
And officiating, so putting it on some books that are recognized, etc.
So if we translated that into kind of a kind of anthroposophical or spiritual way of looking at it, or philosophical, whatever you like, if we said when you're validating someone, you're basically giving them the go-ahead to do something in reality that wouldn't have been possible without that financial. I know it sounds silly.
Without money, if there was no money in the world, someone would say, I got some dough, I'm opening a bakery, I've got an oven, and then they would go ahead and do it, and other people would come and swap, you know, their items for the dough, for the bread. But because in between that, we have accountancy, which is now money, and so it has to go through that validation.
Now,
system.
my question is with this group, with this Valhalla group, the question there would be, if their plan is then to become like a global big bank with lots of local community banks that are under their umbrella, and they then own some of that bank, and it's owned also in local communities by people who are involved in those local community banks. If that's a trend if it wasn't just one company that had seen like a gap in the market, then they will come in and they'll become another big corporation, because that's the nature of the system.
Yeah, people would gain it very quickly.
Yeah, that would grow and that would become successful, and then it might even be bought out, or
exactly.
Or they might have ideals and they would keep going for a while. If it's part of a trend, of a change, a more broader change, then surely that asks us the question that of other people who could either like ourselves or anyone else who would be interested in that kind of path, that they could also go down that path. And then you would have a number, and that's where I think it becomes interesting. If you had a number of groups or teams of people who said, this is a possibility, it's lying under everyone's nose. Until now, we didn't really have the information or the kind of network where such things could become possible. But now, with the kind of technology that we've got, these kind of things do become possible. And then you could say, okay, like any team, you come together and you say, let's educate ourselves. Okay, if you need 30 million euros to get accredited or validated, what would be the sources of that? What would be your aim? What kind of things would you want to fund? Because in our case, it's going to be very different. When we're talking about with anthroposophy, it's not just local communities. We're talking about something that would want to fund spiritual research, and
it's an international community. It's still a community, and that's the interesting thing. It's still,
well, as
the point it's international, but it's local in the sense that there's not a big distance between the validation and the ability. You know, because it's a small enough community that you could understand who you're dealing with and what they're about, and them with you quite quickly, instead of, you know, a huge monolithic bank that
it's something that I was thinking about just before we came on, and which was how if you grew up in the 80s, like society was deemed that there is no society, that, you know, Thatcher UK, there is no society. And then is it not that perhaps it died, and now it has come back, where we have society as a potential globally with the people that you are connected to, not through ties of blood or even of local community, but I mean, okay, this is a very anthroposophical view, but that you're tied through interest or through what you choose, who you choose to be tied to. And in this case, we're talking about artistic or spiritual research. And but I think that I wanted to just make that point, because to say it's an interesting phenomena, this Valhalla group or network, and to just look at if they can do it, anyone can come along and do this.
Yeah, we can take Vidar Bank name. They've got Valhalla. We can have Vidar.
Yeah, indeed. Like
put your shoe on.
It is nice that it evokes that Norse
Ragnarok
ideals, because that's kind of where we're at, isn't it? Like this battle against materialism.
Yes. It's interesting because Richard Werner, who I name check because I'd recommend anyone who's interested in economics or who isn't, I want to understand what banks and economics is about, as a name to check on YouTube. He's one of the CEOs of this network, and they seem very much to have their finger on the pulse of the time. There was a 2-minute video I watched yesterday about him speaking about back in the medieval times when the bankers were monks, the spiritual community. So after the barbarians took over the Roman Empire, the civilization, very civilized barbaric peoples, not stupid in any form, but uncivilized, took over. Much of the sort of the culture and the ancient wisdom in its modern form was preserved amongst the religious communities, particularly the Christian communities, because they had that feeling that there was something new in the world, and the barbarians were beginning to take it up. And so the local farmers, they would take loans from monasteries, and that enabled them, individual farmers, to grow their businesses, to develop their family and their communities. So these were local banks. And it grew up that you had the Templars, which is classically known, who famously used this kind of system to enable people to travel all over the known world, and without having to carry huge bags of money.
Slay infidels.
Well, no, for trade, really. Well, so I guess some of them wanted to do that. Some of them wanted to chat with them, and that's where Solomon's skull was buried or whatever. But so people could do stuff, and without having to carry bags of money and loads of warriors to protect it. So this whole impulse of allowing communities to grow and develop with the backing that is needed in trade, and trade, which is essentially people providing for each other.
Well, I mean, even this example of the Templars, that to defend them on a pilgrimage, and okay, this is difficult for us to translate into present day times, and we don't even want to go there in the discussion, like slaying of infidels. It's silly. It's just not the same time as them. But if you think it's like a spiritual ideal to want to go and to visit the pilgrimage to a sacred site, and if you think, I think immediately of the artists who are there, and the people who struggle in our society to do the things that they would really want to do or to research, and that's my idea of how that translates into the present time, where you actually could. I know there's foundations that support this, but I was recently on one foundation, and it was a big one, and I went on there, and a lot of the research, it said the research was about spirituality and things like this, but a lot had gone in a direction that was very materialistic. And
in what sense? How do you mean?
I think he was talking about different kinds of sort of quantum universes and black holes and things like this. And okay, I mean, I know that I come with a different background, but I think that's precisely it. If you see another foundation that's championing a certain view of the spiritual, and then you can't find access there. So I was seeing, to apply for grants from this foundation, you had to prove that you had sufficient PhD standing in different universities, and that you can then, where you're going to publish your results, will they be in all of those networked universities and academic world? And I just felt like, even before even considering applying. I felt that I don't feel welcomed here in the, and maybe that's the feeling that there's probably a vast majority or of a large number of people out there who might feel similar, that there is things that they would want to do. They don't necessarily want to be affiliated with a university in that sense. And I think that's where you have this idea of a anthroposophical hire an institute of that would fund anthroposophical initiative or research.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's important. If you have the whole purpose of the foundation is in that direction, then you can be much more specialized and have much more expertise. And again, I guess the question would then be, well, doesn't Dornach do that? Doesn't Gautian do that? Isn't that what they do? And I think they do. There are publishing houses,
but there's always, you know, do we have enough funds? And like you say, the tendency is to store funds up into safe investments for the future, you know, instead of investing it in research and development and institutions and enterprises that develop into the future.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what, you know, Christopher Hutenbad was saying when he spoke about this, that a lot of these branches keep the money in funds or in property, and this would be
so the funding is not really there. It doesn't seem to be much gets out and is done. You know, I've never seen like reams of this is what this is research we did this year, you know, this is what came out of it. These are the publications that have gone out to the public. Do you know what I mean? Where's the university on astroembryology or whatever? Where's the university which you know, understands that all the sciences come together as one? You can't separate them all out, etc. All of that requires significant funding.
Well, I think there's two directions that are quite helpful to point out. That one is the collecting of sort of archival work, you know, where there's the reprinting of letters and diary entries and compendiums of documents, because there's a lot of archival documents in Dornach and in the anthroposophical world. So that's one direction that it goes in. On the other side, in the academic, you have the academic study of anthroposophy and how it then fits into the kind of politically correct, for want of a better word.
Yeah, and that is just selling your soul. That's just selling out. That just loses anthroposophy.
Yeah, sure. But I'm just characterizing that then you have like publications where it will be like the untold number of publications that will talk about the world in relation to the key ideologies and ideas that are currently the ones that get in the news. Yeah. So, and how do we fit then anthroposophy to that? So you have then the never-ending discussion or articles about anthroposophy and racism, anthroposophy and gender, anthroposophy and
and
inclusion.
It's like continually swimming just to keep your head above water, instead of just forging on ahead regardless. Because, you know, if anthroposophy is anything, it is a truth, a science about reality as we're able to know it today. And if it's not, then we should all go home today. If it is,
sure. I mean, I agree with you.
You don't have to justify yourself to the rest of the world. Just, I mean, obviously you can tie into other research. There's so much valuable other research going on outside, but this continual like being unsure of oneself and trying to justify oneself for the world is, you know, this is the whole thing. Why is two guys like us considering setting up a bank for anthroposophical initiatives? Hasn't that been done by all the people with vastly better financial acumen associated with and gravitating around Dornach for 100 years? Because it can be done. do you see what I'm saying? Or maybe the time just has, maybe as you alluded to earlier, the time just has not been right in the world until now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of time being ripe when these things, I mean, this is the first time that I've seen something so publicly spoken about in public, that these things are possible. And so it's the time is right for that to become a debate that people can engage with. And I think the question about these two tendencies in anthroposophy, the kind of acribic
Well, it's not just
archiving.
anthroposophy, to be honest. It's in the world in general, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's true.
Archiving it and then politically justifying oneself.
Yeah, that kind of, you could call it corporate, the corporate view of continually going in one set direction and having that, and then having your brand that's as harmless as possible to
Yeah. So
but
you can sell it in the
but
way.
I mean, I understand that. I don't want to put down there's a lot that's positive about the brand, I think, but we have to remember that people in the universities, in the anthroposophical universities, they are very well aware of the importance of branding. And I think this should come back on the table, that when we talk about these issues, it can very quickly descend into people that agree with an official line, and then people who are opposed to it and feeling that it's a bit of a sellout. But what I'm more interested in is bringing back this whole idea of a positive sense for what a brand is, because
everybody can have their brand.
Yeah, there's nothing, I think there's this kind of there's an instinctive loathing perhaps of all things kind of market driven or something.
Yeah, I think it's because it is a big change. There's a philosopher, I've forgotten his name, but he talks about prophilicity. He says this is the time of prophilicity, in the sense of profiles. Everything's about your profile. So it's less about sincerity, which it was more about, 100 years ago. And it's more about prophilicity or profilicity. And, as a philosophy, it's just looking at it purely as a phenomenon in the world, not a value judgment. It's just noticing that is the way the world is going. It's like, the famous Oscar Wilde story, your soul could be rotting inside, but as long as your picture's beautifully presented to the world, you can do wonders. And I think that we can trace that back to a reality we learned through anthroposophy of this, split in everyone. We've all got a good and bad side. And it's not that you have, so you're obviously going to present your good side to the world.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I quite often, you can fantasize, I think, about if you were to do a public relations job with the Goetheanum and with anthroposophy, and if you look at the output, if you look at the video output, and there's still this
tentativeness.
Well, it's tentative, and the need to do everything has to be very holy. Like, even if you're describing the cafe, like, here is the cafe.
It's that old, anthroposophists are the ones with the colourful, fluffy linen scarves.
Yeah, and I think this is a choice. Like, if you were to be contacted by the marketing team, by somebody wanting marketing, I think you do have a choice. I mean, you can either present it as terribly serious and holy, or you can say, yeah, let's have a bit of that.
Yeah.
But also, if I remember my experiences of Waldorf, for example, or even of the Goetheanum, I think you have to bring out, first of all, the joy, a bit more joy, like the joy of singing together in a round. This is lovely. Yeah, everyone's smiling. It's like a very happy moment. or for example, you know, when people meet at conferences, a great, you know, meeting of souls or bonding that takes place, how can you bring that out? And I think that hasn't been exploited enough. So the brand stays very kind of dusty and
I
a
disagree.
bit 1920s.
Yeah, it is, but I think they do try to exploit what you're talking about, and it just gets very hollow because it's all about warm meetings and etc. And that's great, but the point is joy comes out of doing something, that's feeling engaged with other people in something that's real. Do you know what I mean? That is really alive in the world. And so if we just focus on those things, the joy will take care of itself. You don't have to keep talking about the warmth and joy.
Yeah, but I think if you're to actually present that, if you understand, and that, I guess that shows the depth of what we're talking about. If that's not understood, and it doesn't even come in any promotional, I mean, okay, everyone's smiling,
because people aren't feeling it, because there's not enough real engagement.
Well, this is the thing. I think if you had it,
there's real engagement in an anthroposophical, in, you know, a confined circle, but in the world.
See, what about this? I mean, imagine you have one big center. I guess if the thing has gone very, very successfully, you would have hundreds of companies who would also be talking in their own way about anthroposophy in the world. There wouldn't be an official mouthpiece.
Exactly. There'd be no official way to be as an anthroposophist or to speak about anthroposophy, but you know, they'll just.
And again, I think we should just get beyond this whole kind of, I mean, I'm saying that and I'm thinking, you know, the call would then, the shout would then be, oh, it's sacrilege, how dare you say that? And but I think we should just put a rest to that. That's like a ghost. I mean, who actually, does anyone actually say that? I think we're talking about things that everyone would agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, can we just put that ghost to rest?
Yeah. But then I think, you know, this is the thing why something like accrediting, validating people through money creation would be a really valuable thing, because it would really kickstart, to use, you know, the Kickstarter kind of idea as well, of people saying, I'm into that and I'm going to give money for it. And in this case, it would be, we can see you're into that, and so that the value that you're creating will be matched by money in the world.
Well, see, this is where we come back to just to pick up on the point, and the point we were just making, because if you're then funding research, the next step then for that research to be accepted and to awaken interest in the world has to be good marketing, has to be good branding, so that you're running like you're not running a kind of retreat center, or a museum. You're running actually a living research institute that would be like the big pharma institutes or something. You're then, the appeal is then to a broader audience, and then you have to get the branding and the marketing right.
That depends on the individual and the project or enterprise involved individually, because anthroposophy can't have a brand. Do you know what I mean? As soon as that is done, I mean, obviously, a society might have its brand and its, you know, logo and so forth.
No, I mean, I agree. Anthroposophy is a thing. It doesn't, but to be recognized, it needs an identity. It needs a logo. It needs a name.
But are you thinking along the lines then of a, you know, like a stamp seal of approval, like this is anthroposophical and that other things are not?
Because, no, of course not. I think
if you're thinking about a particular organization or group, I can follow that. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
All I'm saying is that at some point, like anything that you do in the world, you have to come up with a name and call the new birth of something.
Yeah. Yes.
And it has to have a name, so that, and that name would have been born on a certain day, and it has its own destiny, and it has a being that accompanies it.
Yes, that's beautiful. So going back to the bank thing, because there's one thing which I do want to get in, because we started to discuss this a little bit before we went on air. Just to mention the thing, I think the Valhalla network, it may be that the way the laws are structured is that a bank has to create a profit by charging interest rates, and so on loans, which is money just created for projects. So people would have to pay interest on the loans. The bank would take that as profits, and it'd be factored into all the national gubbins that economists have such fun doing. And I'm wondering if there'd be a way to go around that, because I'm not, again, I'm only interested in a bank that is purely an administrative organ, so it would only need enough money for administration. And the point about the community banks that I understand is that then the profits the bank realizes through interest rates on the loans, the created money, then go back into charities, or what we call charities, so non-profits in the community. Now, so in practice, how I envisage that is, say, in a worldwide community working on spiritual scientific lines, it would be someone says, right, I've got this endeavor. The bank says, here's the 1,000 euros or 10,000 euros, 20, whatever it is. Then that person proceeds with that endeavor as a kind of like thank you for that validation. They give a little bit back, what we call interest, and then the bank could do something like say, so through us having, validating you having interest in you, your thing has been enabled to go forward in the wider world. Now you can pass it on. So the interest that you pay, where would you like that to be pegged to go to? What charity, what non-profit in this community, international community, would you like it to go to? So then all the way along, no one would kind of like, it wouldn't be like, we're taking this interest from you and then we do with it our own thing, sort of thing.
It's interesting that you say that, because I noticed that also on the website of the Valhalla website, they mentioned that the countries, notably the countries where this is most established, community banking, and it makes up the largest proportion of those societies, is Germany and America. And I think also here of Switzerland as being the center of NGOs, very popular for opening of NGOs.
Okay.
And because of the different laws about Stiftung and foundations, and make that appealing for people to open those things and have them based here, which is why we have Geneva and the world institutions, I guess. Part of the reason behind this. And so it's interesting that culturally, this is where these ideals of community, the community working together, is something to do with America and Germany and the German speaking part of Europe here. And I find that's something interesting to consider, and just to see that there's traditions of working in that direction. And I know that Valhalla, for example, they on their team, I just noticed they had they were represented in UK and in Zurich, and that link between UK and Switzerland it was quite interesting. But yeah, certainly that what you're outlining, where in essence you can have that enthusiasm, that people who would be involved in that kind of initiative would have an enthusiasm for to see and be part of how that community could develop. And again, it's a very different philosophy from standing at arm's length and calculating how much profit I'm going to make and what's the best. It's a far more human again, coming back to this question of can you feel joy in the development of something, a work together? And I think, you know, to keep on mentioning that idealism, that energy that would come through doing something like that, is also very inspiring for anyone working in that kind of initiative, and becomes almost something that you can study in itself spiritually, how that organism grows
in that substance of
yeah
enthusiasm and joy, because it's freed.
yeah because it's a free flowering and or flourishing, I like this word, but and to be open to the surprise that comes with meeting new people who want to connect and feel the resonance with what you're aiming to do. And this is what's happened to me recently, just even writing about this subject, writing about gifting and the ideas of Charles Eisenstein this week has just awakened a number of people to reach out and to say, yeah, I've also been carrying these ideas for some time, and I would really like to work together with other people and see how we could go forward together with some of these ideas. And I think, and again, this is this struggle about, and I think we mentioned it in one of the posts this week, which was, I think we're brought up, or we're educated to have a bit of an island, a passive island mentality in our minds, where everything will be done out for us outside, a kind of convenience culture. And we say, oh, someone else will take the initiative, someone else will do it. And I think there's, in many ways, from schooling to our whole society, I think we're brought up in this way. Whereas when the penny drops, you realize that there's like you said this week, I think there's a joy that comes in doing, the doing of the seeing first, the seeing the ideal and having the intuition first, but then setting it in motion. There's something that is very rich in that.
Yes, and I think particularly doing it with other people as an endeavor for other people, because there's a lot of popular stuff about, you know, become an entrepreneur and make millions and get your own personal jet. And there's a lot, you know, that people can channel their enthusiasm and their energy into that. But that sort of trajectory, you know, ultimately it is a dead end, because ultimately you die and there's game over. I think there's something even more genuine and even more sustainable and joyful, but not as easy perhaps to do. You know, if you're an island forging your own way, so there's the island that says everyone else will sort it out for me. There's the other island that says I'm, you know, what, my one-man army, it's me against the world and my Learjet. But otherwise it's that sort of, it's a more delicate way of finding other people and being able to work with other people. And, you know, I really struggle because I've been aware that even in this short period we've been talking together, I've said many wounding words, in the sense, you know, like, you know, that's, it's to work with other people and to foster joy, and, you know, not to kind of
Well, this is, I
out.
think it's interesting. I mean, we had this other theme of revenge and forgiveness, and I think, you know, to, like, if you're going to do any business, you're going to be confronted so many times, I think, in the course of the day, where you feel you feel, oh God, maybe I said something, I think there was a post today. I posted something on LinkedIn. I went to this guy's site and I said, oh, I love, because he posted something of a hotel. And I said, oh, I love the pic, emoji with love hearts. Love the
Yeah.
pic. What are those giant bats like flying around that hotel? And like, he didn't like my comment. And immediately I was thinking, oh, have I like
Offended.
offended him, like on the world stage, saying that his hotel is surrounded by bats? I mean, it's crazy that our mind does this. But I then went back later and and checked, and he was then explaining, no, the hotel was actually, I think it was a Photoshop that he'd done and put his name of the company over the hotel, and the hotel was actually a Transylvania type mock-up castle from Disneyland. And
And you
so,
thought, is Vlad the Impaler living there?
yeah, but I mean, again, it just brings up all kinds of basic anthropos. It's a schooling path, That's what if you want to say, and this is what I find very exciting, the difference between now and 100 years ago, this idea of social aesthetics, where you say the schooling path I will do with other people. They will help me and I will help them, and
And
we'll do
it's
it
going to
together.
smart at times.
Huh?
It's going to smart at times, Oh, sorry.
Of course, yeah. But I think
That's
that's
the
quite
point.
fascinating. And then
Yeah.
instead of this old, you still see this is a paradigm shift, because the idea that you're an island and you have to study all of the GR and write massive tomes, and it's a completely different philosophy to that. It's a completely different energy. It says engage with people. You're not there. You don't have to be the big shining light on the hill. Rudolf Steiner did that. He did that. Yeah.
It's
And
still there.
yeah, and it's a
Don't
different,
need another of those.
yeah. I mean, I mean, so there's a deeper, bigger question, but um
Oh, yeah, of course, of course. Well, it's wonderful. Have you ever done the experience? And I'd recommend this for anyone if you can facilitate it. Is whatever group of people you have, find the time and the place where you all paint a picture together. So, it could even be like a pizza slice each, have a round piece of paper or something. But it's astounding that just to, that illustrates so much about people, how far apart we are from each other as soon as we engage in a common endeavor
there's another
together.
one that goes along similar lines to that, and that's when if you're more of a introvert, this is also a very easy exercise to do. But if you're in a meeting and you know the thing that you want to say, and you just don't say it, and you'll often find someone else will say that exact idea. Now that can be a rationale for never ever speaking in a meeting ever, which is another issue in
Yeah,
itself. But I think what's fascinating about that is you see that any meeting of people can be an artwork in itself, in terms of what are the words that want to be said in that meeting. What you have a responsibility, and it works the other way around. Like if there's something that should be said by someone else, and then you have the responsibility to say that thing, and that then goes in the direction of what Steiner was often talking about. I think is very helpful to reflect on when he's talking about taking on the karma of other people when they might not have been able to do something for themselves.
right. I see. So,
But that whole topic, I
mhm.
think, is, again, these are questions of social. If your work, you see the kind of mysteries that open up with with what he called the royal art. Yeah, that's what we're talking of here. So I think it's quite really rather, there's many mysteries that come up here about our relation to each other and what wants to be done spiritually in the world, and who's gonna do it, you know.
The royal we, all of us. I guess it's the royal art for everyone being a sovereign creator together. It's that old mystery of, we're all one, yet individuals.
Well, this is where you get down to some of the most profound things of Rudolf Steiner. Even when you say that sovereignty, where we're all one and we remain individuals, we're working with the Jesus to Christ lectures, and there you had Christ with the lines, and going down to each individual circle as an image of how the resurrection body, each person has that template, can develop that template. And again, that's one of the deeper mysteries of life that Steiner brought.
Well, speaking of tying anthroposophical spiritual science into the wider world and, more recognized sciences, it's very popular to speak about the 100 monkey theory. And what you're speaking about is just the human corollary. I say just, but that's the human corollary of that.
That's quite fascinating if you think about how that then mirrors, like, the 100 monkey as the astral, or that mirroring of an idea, and how you see that now, I think, in the world right now. I mean, I'm a bit tentative of saying this, but how many memes does it take of of Klaus Schwab before we actually, to pick up on a theme we've had before he himself starts to lighten up a bit?
Walks on stage with a bowl of bugs one day.
You never know. I mean, that would be a moment, wouldn't it, when someone actually, his PR man says, you know what, Klaus, you only got a few years left. Let's go up there with a bowl, with some snacks. And everyone loves the eats a bug thing. We'll put on some music. Everyone's wearing the t-shirts, and it just changes the whole vibe. And anyway, but I think it's a serious point. I think certainly if you look since 2020, the different initiatives in the world, in different directions, the number of new things that have been founded, the change of perspective, I think, even from people you thought might never see or change their perspective of society. I think even if you just look at yourself, the changes that we've been through in 2 years are rather extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can be objective about that. It's not the same as 2010 to 2020 or 2010 to 2012. I think there's a marked distinction after January 2020.
I think it's true. And at the same time, it's also true that some things can take several or many deep rhythms. So I'm talking about reincarnation, lifetimes to. So for example, I think there's many people who will have seen things going on in the world, and it will have entered them more or less subconsciously, and then they will go through a deep sleep after death and reawaken to it in the next cycle, the next rhythm or down
Yeah.
rhythm, whichever way you look at it. So I agree with you, but I think those things go hand in hand. So there will be some rapid changes, but some it's not like a, you know, a messianic ping and then the whole world changes.
Yeah, but I think even that is a great topic to get put back on the table. If you say there is a possibility that one can get stuck in this life and just repeat patterns, and to just bring back the topic on the table that you can through the way you live this life set up your next life where you just repeat a
Right.
pattern, and it may be on another level where you have to experience things differently because obviously the world moves on.
Then the world gives you shocks. I think that's the way it works. Then the world gives you the shocks, like the last 2 years.
Yeah, collectively, exactly. Collectively, this is what then happens. And if you then think, well, individually, could it be that I become so stagnant in my development that something like this has to happen to me individually? And I think then it's helpful when you look at just that simple threefold understanding of the human being, where you experience something in sickness, or you experience something in karma, or you experience something in conscious understanding. And I think part of what we've lost collectively, and that's why anthroposophy is important, is the ability to talk about how one can consciously understand what's going on. So if you can then bring back on the table, what does it mean precisely if you are preparing for your next incarnation, or that you see aspects of your previous incarnation, that this topic, to bring this back and make this something that people, so that people can get the idea that, okay, the choices I make, down to a very specific degree of what I do, what I say, what I do for work, or how I live my life, are going to have specific detailed consequences, I think is again already something that breaks through a lot of hypnosis.
Yes, and that's why anthroposophy is very useful, because it can lay that out very clearly and, you know, with examples and in a manner which is understandable and makes complete sense.
Yeah, and but it's also, I'm just aware that, this sounds, very serious, and but the only way to get to those insights is to develop a life of reverence with art, or with that. It's not, I don't even know why I'm saying that, but
that germinates, more understanding, because reverence opens you up. You open yourself up to something that unknown to you initially.
well, this is the thing. I always remember when Steiner said there's no greater joy for the human being than to be able to understand in detail how his previous incarnation is linked to this one.
Wow.
And that's an incredible sentence you hear that, and then if you take that sentence and you live with it, and you go deep to check if it's true, and if you have some of that, even intuition or ideas, or you've been shown things of a previous incarnation, even this, because it's almost like the door to again, that the world can be so short in
and
terms,
terrifying.
and terrifying. Yeah, the
And
responsibilities.
if you know there's a link, it's not just, an interruption and it's all swept away. That provides, I imagine there's a huge sense of relief, because you're not just a bubble on a stream easily proven.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it's unconscious, of course, there's a lot of fear there, and
yes,
but when it's conscious, then it enables you also, it creates the desire to want to learn more about. You have then the epoche, the epochs in Waldorf or in anthroposophy, where you study Egypt or Persia or ancient India, and when you have a kind of intimate understanding of your relation to one of those times, or even if you're drawn to a specific person or a specific piece of art or something, but when you feel that deepening of your soul through going deeper, through studying that epoch, that's kind of like again, you start to understand the whole of anthroposophy comes out of the deep longing of a soul to connect to reality across time periods. And this is what Steiner experienced himself, and then gave it further in Waldorf, yeah, and the kind of traditions we know from anthroposophy.
So I imagine you would really begin to feel, I was going to say a citizen, that's not quite the right word, like a person of the world.
Yeah, and not just
really
not just a person of the world, but a person of time, of your time, but also of, you have both. You know, it creates both. I think the desire to be a person of your time, of the world as it is now,
but the world also of the past and the future.
Yeah, but also of humanity, the development of humanity, and that's where you come to. You can say that's when you come to take an interest in such things as the apocalypse, and to say, okay, how can I understand this work of art, not just as something beautiful, but as something that is like a map that is very, very important for me to take hold of, because it can help me orient.
Yes, and so as that's a piece of world art, and then it would really start speaking to you as a world time person.
Yeah, so do we cover what we covered? Banks, and then
individuals, and the royal art.
Yeah.